Yeah. So, does that mean that you want to watch this program? Christy Doran, the Raw in Brisbane, joins us. Talk about it. Welcome back to the show, mate.
Hey, awesome to join you again, Martin.
The Folau documentary, simply titled Folau, first episode aired on free-to-air TV last night. You can watch it, both episodes on the ABC website. Next episode, though, free-to-air TV next week. Christy, so many questions about this. Let's kick it off with, did we learn anything new from episode 1 last night?
As a rugby journo that covered the story right throughout the kind of tumultuous period that was, no, but I did think that it was a poignant reminder of the sensitivities that were going on in Australian rugby, and it did help put in place why the Wallabies were never a chance during the 2019 World Cup. It was a fractured kind of side which has been brought together, and that was certainly one of the things that Dave Rennie was able to achieve. But I don't think we learned anything, and it was very much a sorry, disappointing mess.
Are you trying to intimate that if it wasn't for the Folau thing, that the Wallabies may have won in Japan, or they just would have performed better?
Oh, they just would have performed better, I think. And it wasn't just the Wallabies, it was the Waratahs. And you could just see it on Michael Checker's face. He was heavily prominent during the Folau first and second episode, and the amount of distractions that were going on. It's basically like the very different circumstances, but the Ian Foster, Scott Robertson kind of situation where you're asked every week and every day around things. But it wasn't just Checker, it was the entire team. It was right throughout the 4 Super Rugby franchises at the time, but certainly when they came together with the Wallabies, it was something that had to be addressed. It was an elephant in the room, and it never really, unfortunately in 2019, it wasn't ever kind of solved.
It's a great comparison to make, and a great parallel to draw too, mate, for New Zealand rugby fans, because so many of us are worried and continue to be about the distractions around that All Black coaching selection process, what damage it may have done just in terms of the headspace of those that have got the jobs at the moment, and the continuing distraction that it will be between now and the Rugby World Cup. Because as journos and as people who work on this side of the microphone, mate, I don't have to tell you, but those questions are going to continue to come up and come up and come up. If the All Blacks lose, would Scott Robertson have done a better job? Should this player have been selected? Would Scott Robertson have been selected? And we know this is coming, right?
Yeah, indeed. And I watched it last night, the episode, and I thought, and I watched it with my partner, and it was very much, Peter Fitzsimons had kind of, the former Wallaby and very much in the public domain, said this wasn't a journalist or a media kind of issue, but certainly the media amplified it and kind of blew the oxygen into the fire to make sure that it was a rolling 24 news cycle. And it got out of control big time, and it swept right throughout not just the Australian discourse, it was very much a global issue, and we'd never really seen anything quite like it. I can see it similarly in New Zealand. Looking at New Zealand, the questions are going to be asked as soon as there's a defeat or one or two guys go down or a poor performance. The blowtorch will certainly go on New Zealand rugby, and specifically the All Blacks and Ian Foster.
Christy Doran from the Raw out of Brisbane with us, and we're talking about the Folau doco, episode 1 here in Aussie last night. I've read one review of this program where it says that it effectively cost Raelene Castle and Michael Checker their jobs. Do you believe that? Do you believe that this issue did do that?
Oh, look, there was more issues than that. It was 2018 that Raelene Castle basically wanted answers for why the Wallabies' performances were not satisfactory, and by the end of 2018, Michael Checker, saving his own skin, had sacrificed Stephen Larkham by axing him brutally at the airport in Sydney. That was a painful kind of episode, but from that, Rugby Australia announced that Scott Johnson, a new director of rugby, was coming in, who was basically overseeing a coach who for 5 years had operated with exclusive kind of autonomy and power, totalitarian almost in his approach. That was just as significant And I think the Folau situation certainly didn't help, but it was only one of a number of things that led to where the Michael Checker's relationship with Ray Lancastle was.
Christy, did we learn anything new from episode 1 last night? Are we going to learn anything new from both episodes of this doco?
No, and look, Israel Folau, and it was said at the end of the interview, at the end of the documentary, that Israel Folau did not consent to the production, nor did he, nor was any material, nor did he speak on it. So, look, it's kind of revisionist history at the moment. It was just a sorry reminder of what took place a few years ago. The one thing that I hope does not occur now is that players aren't asked about it, what their thoughts are, again, because I think all that will do is potentially fracture a side that has now come together, I think. And that was outstanding work from Dave Rennie over the last 3 years to bring a side together to remind people about cultural sensitivities. And we saw that last night. And certainly you look at the Pacific Island community, how significant Christianity and their religious beliefs are. I really hope that over the next 24 to 48 hours, players and coaches and administrators don't necessarily bring this back into the public discourse, because it is just a can of worms which will not be solved.
Any good come out of this story at all, on any level?
I think there's an element of sadness that you feel for all parties involved. Naivety was a word that was used, which I thought was apt and had been for years. Israel Folau, I don't think, to begin with, knew what was going on, and before he knew it, I don't know necessarily if he was radicalised, but his strong faith and understanding and interpretation of his religious beliefs had become bigger than maybe anyone possibly imagined. But I think that it was a strong sense of sadness and maybe greater clarity of the complexities that were involved. That's probably the only real takeaway for people about how complex this situation was. And unfortunately, all the other Australian codes watched on thinking, thank goodness we're not involved.
Yet it was only last year that the Manly players rebelled against wearing the rainbow jersey, didn't they? And did that cost them their season? Well, the wheels certainly came off that club after that. Does it remind you at all how good a player he was, and perhaps how unfulfilled that talent was, especially in a rugby jersey?
Oh, definitely. And you think about, this is 4 years ago that this had exploded, almost to the day, in fact. And at that point in time, he'd just broken 60 tries. He had scored in Super Rugby, a record that perhaps is going to be beaten by Julian Sevilla in the coming days. But he's a guy that was just at the peak of his powers. And whilst his position in the Wallabies side was coming up to debate about where to play him, there was certainly no debate about whether or not the player should be in the Wallabies 23 or the 15. He just colossal in the air with what he could do, and I'm glad that he's able to play now for Tonga. He's going to be involved. He's going to be felt very welcomed and loved in that environment. Todd Ikefu, his coach, was speaking prominently in last night's airing of Folau too. So I think, if anything, it's going to be nice to be able to appreciate what he was as a player. And see him on the world stage, because in 2015, when he played his one World Cup, he wasn't actually nearly at his best. He kind of was fighting through some injuries, maybe a little bit of form concerns as well, and yet the Wallabies made the final. And I think that probably spoke volumes around how significant he was still, that even though that he wasn't anywhere near his best, the Wallabies still made the final.
Well, thank you so much for your time, mate. And finally then, and you've just kind of alluded to it, what is he doing now? Where is he now? Where does he play now? And how big a profile does he still enjoy in Australia?
Well, his profile's still immense, that's for sure. But yeah, he's been playing in Japan in Division 2. His side, the D-Rocks, where he's playing alongside Liam Gill. the former Wallaby as well. They unfortunately just got knocked out of their relegation by Quade Cooper's side, the Kintetsu Liners. So they will be remaining in the Japanese second division. But yeah, more importantly, and he'll be at the World Cup in a matter of months in France. And this Tongan side, a bit like Samoa, with some of the players that are now eligible to play, there's some serious talent right throughout that squad. So you wouldn't want to necessarily be taking them easy by resting one or two players, that's for sure.
Devlin.
That is a disgusting act.
The platform.
Thank you very much, Christy.